I'm Kevin Prendergast. I live in Friarstown. I've been training for 60 odd years. I was born in Melbourne in 1932 in a place called Caulfield. And I think at the time there was a depression in Ireland. My father went there to a job and stayed there for a couple of years, and I was born there. Came back, I think, in '34, and my father then got a job working in Palmerstown for a man called W.J. Kelly, who was a shop owner in Dublin, owned some business in Dublin, and trained a few horses for him. And then he went to Rossmore about 1938, bought Rossmore in '39, I think, with people from London called Henry's. So other than that, and after that, then I went to Newbridge first, and was in Newbridge for 4 or 5 years. Then I went to Rockwell, and I got a Leinster medal in Newbridge. We got beaten in the final by Clongowes, and we won the Munster Cup as a senior. I think it was 1949, and fell on the team. We used to call him Kick and Mick English, and was a very good player. I think he played for Ireland 13 times, out half, and we had a very good team. But we won the cup anyway, and finished when I did my leaving not very well, and I went to Australia and I worked for a guy at Randwick called Frank Dalton, and we had quite a lot of success. We had a very good year the first year. He never had as good a year, but just we were lucky we had a couple of good horses, and he was a good man. I was with him for 4 years. I was head man for him, foreman they used to call me, the foreman. And we had about 25 horses. And I went down from Sydney with a mare called Golden Chariot, who turned out a very good brood mare. She bred the champion mare in Australia afterwards. But she won the Caulfield Guineas, and I was there for 6 weeks. She was a box worker, and I had her down there 6 weeks, and I met people there that knew, old people that knew my father and that, you know. And I enjoyed it. 1954 I came back. My father was training then, he was the leading trainer. He'd headed the list 3 times in England. And he didn't have 200 or 300 horses, he had 65 horses. And he headed it 3 years in a row in England. And that time they didn't have aeroplanes to fly them, they had to go by boat and get a box then and be boxed to the meetings. It was a different game now to fly nearly into the meetings. He got his licence I think he took out his licence in 1936. Well, he trained, what do you call it, King George winner, what do you call it, English Oaks winner, Irish Oaks winner, Irish Derby winner. Trained the winner of the Hinds 8 years in a row. He got warned off. He brought a horse called Blue Sail to York, and he'd run 4th at the Curragh in a maiden, and he won a maiden at York, and they gave him 12 months. They didn't get the 12 months in Ireland, but he got it in England. They said he mustn't have been trying that. His form had improved to win a maiden at York. Blue Sail was the horse's name. I was in Australia now when that was happening. When he went back to York then, the following year after he got his licence back, and he won 4 races. I worked with him from 1954 to 62. And I got my licence in 63. My father was born in Curragh, and I had an uncle, Uncle Mick. He won the Cunningham Cup for Joe, or the Irish National for Joe Osborne. I used to ride out for my father when I'd be home on my holidays, that's all, from Rockwell, you know, ride out when I was 10, 12, 14, 15. I think the first winner I rode was a horse called That'll Do for Denison's Trucks, you know, what he got in Downpatrick. I think that's the first winner I had. I'd say probably a couple of hundred. My father's brother, Kevin, same name as myself, he got killed in 2 Mile House when he was 18 in a point to point. My father's brother, and he picked him up at the back of the fence and he was dead in his arms. And he forbid me to ride over hurdles or over fences. And Paddy Mullins got me to ride at mare called Fourth Last one day at Leopardstown. He couldn't get anybody for a night. What he got, he rang me up and said, "Will you ride her?" I rode her, and she was a good mare. She was down before Tria, and she finished third. And the old man, she was grey mare. The old man sees me jumping. What he got, Paddy? Oh, and, well, he went absolutely crazy. So that was the end of that. No, I rode for everybody. I rode for Lord Fingal. I was his jockey. I rode for Lord. I rode for Colonel Hill, Dillon, all those fellas. And I rode for Danny Morgan, who was one of the best riders we ever had. Rode for him for a long time. I rode for Paddy Norris. You never heard of Paddy Norris, did you? Caroline's father. Rode for him for years. I rode for a lot of them. I got one horse from the Lord Mayor of Cork, Michael Sheehan. And he had been with my father, and he run several times, and I won a bumper. My first winner was a bumper I rode myself at the Phoenix Park, I think 1963 or 4. And he also won a bumper. His second win was a bumper in May at Leopardstown, and he's called Zara. And then I was very, very lucky. I was very pally with people in America, and father had a filly belonged to a lady called Mrs. Whitney Tippett, who was ex-wife of Jock Whitney, who was the American ambassador to England. And she asked me to come out, and she had a lot of horses in a barn down in a place called Longotland, down in Virginia. So I went down there anyway, and all these horses had been in training with him. One of the best trainers in America at the time was Charlie Whittingham. And when they broke down or something happened to them, they went back to the farm. So there were 17 of them anyway, and they arrived in Shannon. And that was basically how I got started. I got these horses, but they were all bits and pieces, and they all most of them did all right. And she came over here, but it's a long story. She was a hardy lady. She was on the American jumping team when she was young, and she was married to Jock Whitney, who was the American ambassador to England at the time. And she came over here a couple of times in the summer, and she'd go to race meetings, and she used to dress in fuchsia, and she had a poodle she used to carry the poodle in a bag. But she was very friendly with some of the Eddie Arcaro and some of the actors and actresses from Hollywood at the time. I got Sheikh Hamdan, who was very good. I always got 10 or 12 horses him every year for 34 years, and he died last year. And I always had 10 or 12 for him. Biggest of that, maybe 20 at one stage. But he got sick and he died, and most of the horses were sold up, and they decided they didn't want any more horses trained in Ireland. So I had Lady O'Reilly, who was a super owner, and Tony. They were very, very good. Great. First winner I had, first real horse I had was a horse called Verdlas, and I won the Coventry at Ascot for them. It was a cheap horse. I bought him, I think, off Sheikh Mohammed for 26 grand. And he wound up being second in the Irish Guineas. Then he went to America. He didn't do very well. He came back and he stood at the Irish National Stud. Quite successful. He was goodish, middle of the road sire. I had some very, very good horses over the years. You know, run-of-the-mill horses. I had a horse called, the early horse I had, a horse called Hulla Hull. He was a good 2-year-old. We were a bit unlucky with him. He went to run in Ascot, and it got flooded. The track got flooded. They called off the meeting. So he couldn't run. He won the Lily Agnes at Chester by 5 lengths. And I remember Sir Cecil Boyd Rochford saying, what do you call it? Sent the stewards down to examine him, said he was a 4-year-old. He said he looked like a 4-year-old, not a 2-year-old. He was American, big strong American horse. I got a fella called Norman Butler, who was an Englishman. He lived in Tipperary, and he was married to one of the Jewel ladies. And I got a filly off him called Pidgeot, and I won the 1,000 guineas with her, and she won the Ledger. And then I wound up, I got lucky, I got another horse then. He won the guineas, a horse called Northern Treasure. I bought him in Newmarket for a good patron of mine at the time. He was a publican in Dublin, Davy Brennan, and actually his grandson and his son have a couple of horses with me now at the moment. I got him, he belonged to a fella called Neil Skibby, who was basically he was a car salesman for Volkswagen, and got very big and bought a stud over here, Lovestone, and I had always a couple of horses for him, and I was lucky enough to get NEBBIOLO in Newmarket. I bought him in for 3 grand, and I bought it for 3 grand, and he come round and said to me, do you have an owner for him? I said no. He said, I'll own him. So that's how I got him. He won the Jim Cracks and was second in the Middle Park, and he won the 2,000 guineas. He was a good horse. He only covered 3 seasons, and he headed the list with 3 seasons. Like everything else, he wasn't the prettiest horse in the world, and he went to stand up in Meath with a fella called Patrick Hayden, and after 3 years he got loose one morning and in August and broke his shoulder. That was the end of that. But he was a lovely horse, good sire. I won 2 Ledgers with my coronation, or a Hardwick, and he won the Ormond Stakes at Chester, the coronation, or the race at Ascot. He was quite a good horse. He was 3rd in the Arc. 3rd in the Arc, was very unlucky not to win the Arc. Jockey rode him and he drew 17, and he was still 17, and he turned it in and flew home and was finished 3rd, finished ahead of Podolsky, who won the Japan Cup. He was the best horse I ever trained. I trained ARDROSS, my father owned him, and he won the Jockey Club Cup, and I sold him to Lester Piggott after the race for quite a lot of money. And he won, I think, 2 Gold Cups for him, and he had a rating of 133 when he was with me, and when he retired after being 2nd in the Arc at 6-year-old, he was 134. He improved a pound. My father bred him, and he was out of a mare by Arctic Slave, who stood in Folks' Mills with Mick Hickey. The last mare I had out of it was, she bred a horse, she was called Sapphire Spray. She was out of the line, and she bred a horse, and I think it was called Crystal Breeze, and what do you call it? Tony Callahan bought him off me as a foal, and he sold him, and Willie Haggis bought him. Willie Haggis got a profit on him, and the fella in Australia, he won $500,000 with him. So he was a good horse, and he was the last one out of the family. Won a Ledger with a horse called CONOR Pass. Belonged to, it was a syndicate horse, belonged to Mr. Moore and Michael Sheehan, and there was a couple of them in it. And I think Ted Pettit, there was a sort of a syndicate. He won the Ledger for them. Good horse. I won an Irish, champion hurdle with Prominent King. Just got beaten the champion hurdle with Talgo Abbas. Fourth in the champion hurdle with, I'm supposed, there 8 years ago. I won a Galway hurdle with a horse called Walkie. I never had many jumpers, but the last good one I had was KDT. She won the Ladbroke hurdle at Leopardstown at Christmas. There about 6 years ago. Only trained a handful of jumpers. I found having a handful of jumpers was grand, but hard to keep them sound. If you get a good one, anybody could train a good one, but nobody will train a bad one. And my father, I took over his horses when he got very sick. In 1978, I think he got very sick. He died in 1980, the 20th of June. And I remember going to see him before I went to Ascot. And I was a desperate man to smoke. I smoked, couldn't stop smoking. And he looked at me and he said, if you don't stop smoking, he said, you'll be joining me very soon. He said, I won't be here when you go back. That's the truth, I'm here. I never smoked since. The horse got beat that much in the Gold Cup. ARDROSS. And he died, I think the horse ran at 4, at half, 3/4, 4. And he died at 1/2 4. But after the horses passed the post, he died. I've always had 65, 70 horses. 56, 60, 70. That was it. That's all I could accommodate anyway. Didn't want any more. Very hard to, very hard to train, big teams of horses. But these young fellas seem to be able to do it. On the day, I think, winning the Guineas at Newmarket with NEBBIOLO was a big day. Like the Minster, even the commentator says, and he was calling it, and the NEBBIOLO, it was the Minster he thought it was. And it was a big day. And I was a bit unlucky not to win the Derby too a couple of years ago with Mad Mood. He was second. And just, it didn't go right on the day and he only got beat. I have my own gallops, but we only go to Curragh maybe once a week, or at a push we might go twice a week with different horses, But it's really, it could make it self-contained. But when you get to a certain stage in life, we'll leave that for somebody else. Oh, you could walk to the road then, but now I have to, what I have up, my farm goes to the edge of the Curragh, so we can walk. We have to do a little bit of the road, not much. We're on the Curragh. We should have no horses at the Curragh anymore, like what there used to be. There's about a quarter the amount of horses at the Curragh that used to be. Weld, Morta would have maybe the guts of 100 horses now, but outside that, Ken Condon have about 50 or 60, but everybody had, like in those days, everybody had plenty of horses. Only for the outsiders coming in and schooling. Well, there's nobody going racing as such, because there's no incentive for them to go. Like, we take Derby Day last year, 50 quid a head, and if a fellow wants to bring his wife, it's 100 before he gets in, and if he goes in then and he buys a hamburger, they want to charge him 12 euros for it. And they want to charge him nearly the same for a pint. That can't win. Instead of letting them in for what, put something up and put it on the card in a raffle, and let them pay X amount going in, and they have a ticket for a raffle for maybe an old car or a horse or something. you know, to give it a bit of buzz and let them in. Like £100, like to go into a race meeting, and after that you're on your own, like, you know. Everybody went to the Curragh then, farmers, publicans, they all went, everybody went. It was a religious thing, go to the Curragh. But now, they had the stand house there, and it drew more people. They wouldn't go to the races, but they'd go down to the stand house to meet their pals and the stand house. Good hotel, there was a swimming pool in it and everything. What'd they do? Aga Khan bought it for 15 million, they knocked it down. They were all in their own. Gabriel Kern was a very good rider. I think he won the Guineas for me on Northern Treasure, and he won the Irish 1000 Guineas for me on Arctic Royale. My father bred that, and I had David Parnell riding for me. Now, he wasn't an apprentice for me, but he got killed. But I'd say he was probably the best rider I ever had. And then I had an Australian chap called Laurie Johnson. Then I had Charlie, Brian Hughes, Charlie Swan. That chap that retired there. He retired a couple of days ago. Brian Cooper. He was apprenticing me for a while. I had some very, very good lads, you know. Apprentices come, they apply to you and you take them on. And there was no such thing as the apprentice school then, you know. They came to you and, what do you call it, after that, like Hayes was in the apprentice school, he came from the apprentice school to me. He's a very good rider and he's doing very well. He's probably the last apprentice I had of any note, you know. You see, the apprentices now go to big stables because they have a better chance in big stables, like where you have 10 or 12 or 14 horses. The owners they don't want them to be apprentice ridden, they want to be jockey ridden, you know, which you can understand. One time we had here in this country that in those listed races, apprentice could ride in a listed race, and he was claiming £7, he could claim his £7, right? Or if he was claiming £5, he could claim his £5. But they stopped that, right? But my contention is that if an apprentice rides in an apprentice race and he claims £7, and you put him in a straight handicap, the handicapper will charge him maybe £10, even though he's claimed 7 in an apprentice race. In England they don't. In England, if you win an apprentice race, you get no penalty. So they're not helping the apprentices really. They're knocking them out. If they're not able to claim in a listed race, and they can claim in an apprentice race, and they get a penalty for riding in an apprentice race, it's unbelievable. Unbelievably stupid. But England, they're sensible. No penalty for an apprentice race. So it gives the apprentices a chance. A fella run a nice horse in an apprentice race to give a kid a ride and win. Here if you run a nice horse in an apprentice race and he wins 3 or 4 lengths, your man will give maybe 16 or 18 pounds. Basically, I agree with they shouldn't be allowed to use the whip more than 8 times. And basically, I think lifting it up here and bringing it down, I think just ear high, and and basically what they wanted to do, if they take them away, just hands and heels and down the shoulder and back under, you know. I'm not really, I think you need, it's like if you're driving a motor car, you use the steering wheel, you know. So to keep a hold of their heads, most of them throw the reins at them. A lot of them are throwing the reins at them. Don't like that. They can go anywhere when the reins loose. It's the same as driving a motor car. If you're driving it on the clutch and you're not steering, it'll go that way. That's the biggest disgrace that ever happened in Irish racing. We had, it was in August, the lovely summer's evening, half of Dublin went to it. You couldn't get into it. And lovely meeting, in a beautiful place, beautiful setting. Next thing, gone. I haven't been in it for years. I think there's buildings in where the track was. Baldoyle was a grand little track. Bought it for building, same crew. There still. They couldn't get planning permission because there was rows of houses out in the front and the sea is outside that. So there was no place for the tourists to go. I liked Leopardstown. I think Leopardstown. And we were unfortunate there that they lost the best 6 furlong track in the world. And that was lost through bad management. They could have got in and done a job with the council and built a bridge over it and still had the 6 furlong track. I think Dundalk is a great facility. I had plenty of winners in Dundalk. Oh yeah, I like Dundalk. And I mean, what do you call it? How Luke Comer wasn't allowed to build the track in Palmerstown and the airport up the road, Goff's next to it. What do you got? 15 minutes from Dublin. I mean, crazy. And he would have built a state-of-the-art place, Luke Comer. He wasn't allowed to do it. They wouldn't give him the fixtures. We can't afford the horses it's like footballing. When Alex Ferguson was training Man United, every young player came up, even Ronaldo when he was a kid. I'll have him. I have Ryan Giggs. I'll have Roy Keane. And he could buy them. And it's the same now. The fellas with the big purses can buy the big horses. If you buy a horse out of a classic winner, out of a Guineas winner, or out of a Jim Cracks, or out of a, Queen Mary winner, or out of a Cheveley Park winner, you have a better chance in buying one out of a mare that wins a seller. And it doesn't make one, he can buy 3 or 4 bad ones, but when he buys 3 or 4 bad ones, he can buy 1 or 2 good ones. And the bad ones are forgotten. The way it's gone now, you run the horse 3 or 4 times and you get a mark. And the mark is what you got, and if he runs well off that mark, or finishes, he's gone up. And you won't, with the ordinary horse, you won't win too many races with him. These modern stallions, Frankel and what you got, See the Stars, and they were all great race horses. And good pedigrees, you know. See the Stars, a great pedigree, out of an Arc winner. There it is again. She won the Arc de Dam. And she bred Galileo. Mind you, she bred a couple of Stumers as well. But she did breed Galileo and she bred See the Stars. 2 champions. I was very lucky with horses by Red God, you know, Sons of Red God and Nearco back that line, you know. Very lucky with them. Ballyogan was a great sire. Early on, when I was a kid, young fella. My father had a very good filly called Paddy's Sister. She was by Ballyogan out of a mare called Bertha Wood. She won 5 times as a 2-year-old. She won the Jim Cracks, she won the Jim Cracks, she won the Champagne Stakes, she won the Queen Mary, she won all the big 2-year-old races. And she was favourite even 6-4 for the Guineas. She broke down, she went up for a gallop in Baldoyle and she broke down. She never ran afterwards. But she bred the winner of the Guineas. She bred Ballymore. He won the Guineas. And I tell you one thing now, only the water was so high, I'd have been gone fishing to Roscommon today, because we had planned, myself and a mate of mine. And I always catch a few nice trout this time of the year on the fly, which starts, the river be down, and just, we get sort of maybe, in the day now we might have half a dozen or a dozen. Lads, £1.50 or £1, you know. It only lasts for a while because the river goes down, but when it's up, it gets fairly dry. But these be all wild trout, you know. I've been very lucky. I've had a great time. Been very lucky. I had a great partner. She died there. She'd be dead the 16th of January, 3 years ago. 3 years dead, January 16th. She was 87. We soldiered together for a long time. Well, I have plenty of, what do you call it, I play a bit of golf. I do a bit of fishing. I do a bit of shooting. I have a few pints. It keeps me alive. There's nothing easy, and hard work never killed anybody. But I did work very hard. But you can work hard and enjoy yourself. I always say, there's no pockets in a wooden suit.